Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, Right Career, Right Now. My name is Dan Gardner, and I'm a member of the Career Programs team here in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered to our 339,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. I know we have alumni joining us today from many faraway places, including Brazil, China, India, Mexico, and here in the States, Phoenix, Arizona, Iowa City, Iowa, Marietta, Georgia, Arlington, Virginia, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Natick, Newton, Northbridge, and many more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, just a few brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on our Zoom online meeting platform. And if you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of today's presentation, please contact Zoom support. You can see the number on your screen there. It's 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is indeed being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website. You can find it at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A box. And you can find that by hovering over either the top or bottom of your screen and selecting Q&A. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU College of Arts and Sciences alumna, Colleen DelVecchio. Colleen is the owner of Colleen DelVecchio Consulting, which is a coaching and consulting business focused on helping individuals reach their career goals and helping businesses move towards a strength-based management model. Colleen spent 9 years working as a career counselor for alumni at Smith College, and she's consulted with Converse, PFM, multiple chambers of commerce, independent private schools, large state universities, and of course, many small businesses as well. With over 20 years experience in organizational change, strategic management, career counseling, women's leadership, and training and staff development, she uses this strengths-based leadership model to guide her work. She taught public speaking at UMass Amherst and volunteer and board management at Bay Path University. She is, of course, a proud member of the class of 1992 from BU, graduating with her bachelor's in psychology, and she holds a master's in nonprofit management from Bay Path University, and she's also a Gallup certified strengths coach. Colleen, thank you so much for being here today. The floor is all yours.
Great, thanks so much. I'm excited to be here. So I know we're going to put a poll up now while we get started. So you'll see on your screen right now, that's a quick question of how would you categorize your career right now? Is it perfect, exactly what you need? Is it one that used to work for you, but not now? Was it never a good fit for you? Does it pretty much pay the bills? Do you feel like your career is non-existent at the moment? So I'm going to give you a second or two to answer that poll, and we will talk about it in a moment. All right. Great. Thanks, everyone. I see lots of people kind of putting in their answer. It looks about half of you say it actually used to work for you, but not right now. A few of you said it was never a good fit. Some of you are telling me it pays the bills, about 20%, and about 15% non-existent, right? And 9% of you are actually saying it's perfect. So that is very exciting. All right. So today during the webinar, we are going to talk about what is really important to you for your next job, to get some clarity about what motivates you, and to find some inspiration and motivation to make a change. Hopefully, if you're at a place at a desk or something while you're watching this, it would be great if you could grab a piece of paper and a pen or pencil or some sort of writing utensil, because there's a few things we'll do today that'll be helpful if you actually write them down while we do them and you kind of sketch it out for yourself. After the webinar, if you want copies of these slides, in the follow-up email, we'll have my information. You can ask me for them and I'll send them to you. along with any of the handouts that we kind of do today. If you want actual copies of them, I can send those to you after as well. So, what's wrong with this picture? This is the kind of Venn diagram, right, that's out there all the time about careers, right? It talks about you should find a career that you love to do, that you have the skills to do, and that it makes you enough money to live. And everyone always says, this is your ideal career, right? This little kind of spot in the middle is what should be your ideal career. And so as somebody who's done career counseling now for, pretty much right since I graduated from BU back in 1992, I found that there's a big piece missing here, right? And to me, the big piece that's missing here is that it fits with your life right now, which means, right, that ideal career is even a smaller little spot in the middle. But really what it comes down to for most folks is that a career that works for them at one point in their life doesn't necessarily work for them at the next point in their life. Our lives change, yet for some reason, we've always expected our careers to just be what it is and that it works for us all the time. So there are times that, the fits in your life right now is much more important than you love to do it, or that it's utilizing the great skills you have, or that it even makes you the most money. It fits in your life right now, to me, is the key element to all careers working well for us. And that means we have to change, and change is scary. So let's look a little bit about my career, right? This is my career progression. So if you look at the ones on the left, it talks about, right, first I was at BU. I was single and I was a student living in Boston. Great. Then I was living in Boston and eventually got married. And from the time I was a student until then, I worked at nonprofits, a whole variety of nonprofits. I worked at nonprofits that served people with disabilities and helped them get jobs. I worked at nonprofits where I did organizational consulting. I worked at nonprofits where I helped people who were getting out of jail find jobs. Right? I did a whole bunch of things that happened to do with helping people find their careers. And then after we got married, we decided to move out to the Springfield area. We bought a house, I had a baby, and then my daughter got sick when she was about 10 months old and spent a few days in the hospital. And she was fine after, but it really scared me. And the job that I had, I was having to travel for. So very quickly, I realized, this job that I had loved for 8 years, all of a sudden didn't quite fit anymore, right? I loved the job. I had the skills to do it. It more than paid the bills. I was paid really well. I really enjoyed and loved the travel. But now that I had a 10-month-old who happened to spend a week in the hospital, boy, it didn't really feel right anymore. So I started looking for something different. And what I really wanted was a job where I knew I could go to the same place Monday through Friday, like 8 to 4, 8 to 5, like whatever the hours were, but that I knew I'd be a very specific place and I could drop my child off at daycare. And it would be a very kind of straightforward thing at that point. And so I ended up getting a job running the volunteer department at a hospital. It was a switch for me. It was a new kind of field. I had done volunteer management, mostly as a volunteer, but it was a career that fit my life really well at that point. Right? I knew that I was going to be there for straight hours. I didn't have much night and weekend work. I didn't have to travel, except to go to a conference or two, which was great. And then eventually, that child ended up going off to kindergarten. She ended up going to a fantastic charter school, but it was 40 minutes away from us. During that time, I got divorced, became a single mom, and decided to move more towards the Pioneer Valley, towards the Northampton, East Hampton area of Western Mass. Put me into my second marriage eventually. And at that point, I decided higher ed was a really good match for me. So I started doing career counseling for UMass Amherst, eventually moved over to Smith College, and found a career that, again, I really loved doing, was a really good match, and was a good match for me at that point in life. So I had a little bit more flexibility. My child was in school, so I wanted a different type of flexibility, right? It wasn't daycare that was open all, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was now at a place where I have a little bit more flexibility of time. And then over the past year, I decided my kids are in high school and I really wanted to spend some time with them. I have a daughter and a stepdaughter who are sophomores in high school and wanted to really branch out and travel more and do a lot more things, and decided that going out on my own and doing coaching and consulting on my own was a much better fit for me at this point in my career. So over time, right, my careers lined up like that. Now, if you had asked me back when I was graduating BU at 21, if this is what my career was going to look like, absolutely. Right here, it looks like it fits into these nice boxes. There are many points where it felt like I was going up, down, left, right, and upside down in my career. You know, looking back, it does look like it's this nice, kind of very specific, thoughtful pattern. But really, when it came down to it, at the time, that's not what it was at all. I was changing careers because my life was changing and things are happening in my life that made the career I had not fit. Even though the skills and the money and I enjoyed doing it, the job itself wasn't fitting with my life. So that's kind of how I started really thinking about how important it was. And as I was doing a lot of the career counseling I did, I found that when I worked with people with disabilities, when I first got out of college, this was exactly what we did, right? As a career counselor for people with disabilities, I really worked with folks to make sure that they could find a career that matched with what their lifestyle was. But for some reason, when we work with the kind of population of folks who don't have disabilities, we weren't looking at it that way. So that's kind of my background and where I came to this. So this is where, if you have that pen and paper in front of you, I want you to draw a circle and cut it into these 8 areas. You don't have to write the 8 areas if you don't want to, but even if you just draw a circle with those 8 areas. And this is the wheel of life. If you Google it, you'll find probably 100 different versions of it. These are kind of the 8 areas that I tend to kind of work with people on. And what I ask people to do is to look at their wheel of life and to rate themselves on those 8 areas on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 1 being, it's not so great. 10 being, everything's perfect here. And what I'll say to folks too is that each one of these is going to be a different definition for all of us. And I'll give you, finance and health as the 2 big examples. For finance, you could be someone who has $50 million in the bank, right? You have plenty of money. You probably don't need to work another day in your life. But you're somebody who's still worried about retirement. You're worried about your next generation. You really want to make sure that you're continuing to make money, and you don't feel really secure about your finances. And so you might rate your finance as like a 6. On the other hand, you may be somebody who is, right, living paycheck to paycheck. You just barely make it on your rent every month and, paying your basic bills. But to you, you know what? You're living fine. You're living month to month, and that doesn't worry you. You don't have anything saved for retirement, but that's okay with you. So you give it a 9. So think about it in that way. The same with health, right? You could be someone who has multiple health issues, but you rate yourself as a 9 or a 10 because you feel like you have them under control. Or you could be someone who doesn't have many health issues, but rate yourself as like a 6 or a 7 because you feel like health is something you're very concerned about. So take a minute and kind of think about where you land in all of these. And so why do I do this with folks, right? I'm not doing this because I'm a therapist or a counselor or a full life coach, right? I'm someone who does straight career coaching. But what you start to realize is that career is one piece of the puzzle, right? And that our careers are not in complete isolation of the rest of our lives. We can't really truly say, right, what happens at work, leave it at work, and it won't ever bleed over to the rest of our lives. It's the type of thing that, for the majority of us at least, right, that what happens at work stays with us during the day. We lose sleep over our jobs sometimes. Or we realize that certain other parts of our life creep into work, or work creeps into the other pieces of our lives. So, the example that I always like to give folks is during that time that I had gotten divorced and I was a single mom, my daughter was in kindergarten and we had a beagle who was, at the time, felt overwhelming to me to have my dog. And so his name was Wilson. And Wilson was a beagle, and I had an electric fence for him. So I didn't even have to take him for walks. I legitimately came home from work, opened the door, let him out to go to the bathroom, and fed him. But I hit a stint where I had to bring him to the vet a couple of times. And all of a sudden, everything about my dog was overwhelming to me. I felt like that was the thing that was really going wrong. And I even went as far as to ask my ex-husband if he would take the dog instead of me keeping the dog. Now, this was my dog. I loved this dog to the nth degree, and I can't believe I ever thought about giving him back to my ex-husband. But at that moment, everything felt so overwhelming because my career was a really bad fit at the time. I worked for a place that had very strict rules, had very little flexibility, and I had a 5-year-old who, wanted her mother to show up to the school plays and, her soccer practice and ballet and all of those things. And so the overwhelmingness of my career had leaked into me being so stressed out that I almost gave my dog back to my ex-husband. Now, fast forward a few months, I got a new job. I did keep my dog. And a few people started saying to me, wow, you look great. Did you get your hair cut? Did you lose weight? Right? They started making all of these really complimentary comments to me. And I was like, no, all I did was get a new job. And I realized, right, that job had just stressed me out so much and was just the wrong fit at that moment. It had been a great job for me in the beginning, but at that moment it was so wrong that it was physically showing on me and making me want to choose other things. So whenever I coach people, I always start with the wheel of life and have you really rank yourself in these areas, date it, and then put it away. And then in 3 months or 6 months, go back and look at it and see how you're doing in those areas. Because sometimes we think our career is what needs to change when really it's some other parts of our lives. And other times it's what's happening in our career. We want to make sure that what we're doing for our career is something that is going to make sense through all those other areas for ourselves because our career touches those areas. Sorry, I went back the wrong way. So I want to ask everybody the 5 whys. So if you have that piece of paper, you turn it over, change it to a different section. And I want you to think for yourself, first up, why do you work? Why do you work? What is your reason for working? So think about that for a second. And so the idea of the 5 whys, right? This is a kind of warm-up game or an exercise that many, many places use in many different ways. But I'd love to do it around the question of why do you work? And the idea of the 5 whys question is that you ask, why do you work? When you answer it, you then ask why again. And you do that 5 times with the idea that the 5th answer is the one that is most likely your real reason behind doing it. So let's look at my 5 whys. If you ask me, why do I work? I start by always saying, right, I work because I need money to support myself and my family. And if you asked me why again, I would say, because I've always been a big contributor to our finances. And for many years was the sole contributor, right? Well, if you ask me why, well, because I have 2 daughters to send to college at the same time. Why? Well, because I don't want my daughters to have to take out substantial student loans. Why? Well, because my parents paid for BU for me, and I do want to do the same for my girls. I don't want my girls to have to take out substantial student loans. I'll definitely have to fix that typo on the slide because that was wrong, right? So really what it comes down to at this stage of my life, why am I working? I really want to work and make the money for my children at this point, right? At my children, I have a daughter and a stepdaughter. They are sophomores in high school right now. And really my sole focus right now is to save that money and to have a job that pays enough that I can help support them for college. That is my why for working. Well, that's a lot different than at a different point in my life where I might have been building my career, or I was working in order to, as a single parent, I was working fully to support the whole household. Now I'm remarried and I don't have to have that full burden myself. So really thinking about, why are you working right now? And for some folks, because money is so important, right, that we're working because we need the money, sometimes take the money piece out of it and ask yourself those whys as well. Why are you working if money was, if the basic things in life were covered for you from a money standpoint? So when you start thinking of these things and you start thinking about what might be a good match for you going forward, I always start at, what does the current you look like? What do you value? What do you need out of a career? What do you actually want out of a career? And so we start with career values because it's something that a lot of folks don't really think of to stop and look at. So the next 3 slides, I actually have lists of many different career values, and I'll leave them both up for a couple of minutes while I talk, so you can jot down a few of the things that you really value in a career. Again, I can send you this as a handout, but also if you even Google career values checklist, you'll probably find 50 different ones that different career coaches have made over time. And so what's important with your career values is that every time you go to look for a job, or every time you feel like your job isn't quite being what you want it to, you should take a minute, step back, and relook at your career values. Because these are going to drastically change over time, right? The things that I valued in a career when I was 21 and just graduated BU were that I wanted a job that gave me health insurance, right? Back then, we all couldn't stay on our parents' health insurance any longer than September 1st after we graduated. At least that's what my dad's insurance was, because I knew, okay, I need a job to get me health insurance. I loved Boston. I knew I wanted to stay in Boston, so I wanted a job that paid enough for me to stay in Boston. We were in the middle of a recession, so truthfully, I didn't care what I did, right? I was willing to do almost anything just to stay in Boston. Because at the time, I thought I wanted to go and do my doctorate in sports psychology. So I thought, just give me a year or two, I'll live in Boston, stay there. A lot of my friends were still there. And that was all that I really wanted from a career at that moment. I wanted to make sure I had some vacation time and, a job that paid the bills so I could stay. And that was really it. Now, what I would want from a career is very different. We'll talk about that in another minute. So here's another kind of the continued list of possible things that might be part of your career values. And quite often people ask me what I mean by all of these. And what I always say to folks, right, the definition of these is what you want it to be. So for you, when I look at flexibility as one of the career values on there, right? Flexibility for me and flexibility for you might be 2 completely different things. You might mean flexibility of time where you have complete control over your time, right? You schedule everything for yourself. You can do your work any time of the day or night. As long as you get your work done, it's no big deal. For others, flexibility might mean working from home occasionally if you have a sick child, or you're sick, or you need to take the dog to the vet, or that you work from home 1 day a week because it just feels better to work from your house every once in a while, right? So things like flexibility are going to be very different for everybody. So all of these, you'll have your own definition of those as well. But really think about, what do you value at this point in time? And here's like the 3rd page of these, right? And looking at the different things that you might value in a job. And like I said, there are so many lists of these, and the things that you value could go on and on. I mentioned health insurance being something I valued when I first graduated college. Having one child who has some complicated medical issues throughout my adult life, I have always been very conscious of what health insurance I get and making sure that that health insurance covers us being able to go to Boston Children's Hospital. And knowing that, right, it's something that I value and is important to me. And I'll only look at jobs that offer health insurance that allow me the flexibility to choose the doctors that I want to go to, right? So though health insurance has been a constant in things that I really value in a job, it's changed over time what that means to me, right? When I first graduated college, I didn't really care what the health insurance was. I just cared that I had it. But now it's a very specific thing for me as to what I want my health insurance to look like. So what's important to me right now, right? These are the 5 things that are important to me. And as I was constantly doing workshops and talking with alumni and talking to different folks that I was coaching and talking them through what was important to them, I started to realize that my current job wasn't kind of meeting those needs for me. So what's important to me at this point in time? My husband, my 2 teenage daughters, and now I have 2 beagles. Flexibility, and some really good flexibility, right? I want to be able to work from home when I want to. I want to be able to travel a lot. I want to be able to work from anywhere. It's really important to me to have a job where I get to take something good and make it great. I love working with people to improve. So I really want a job that allows me to kind of see that change in either people or process or leadership. The 4th thing really important to me is to make decisions that have an impact. I really enjoy leading teams, and it's important to me to be able to make decisions that actually change what's happening at an organization. And the last piece is travel. And travel for me, it could be travel for work, but it's also travel with my family. And to really kind of get on, to me, it's really important to make those memories that last. And so for my last 2 jobs, I've done a lot of travel, and I've been able to bring my family with me quite often when I travel. And that's really important to me, to either travel on work time and to travel on my own time. So as I'm going to look for jobs, or whenever I'm looking for a job, I stop and go back and look at these and say, right, is this a job that is going to be able to let me do the things that are important to me and the parts of my life that are important? Now, these are going to be completely different for everybody. So last night I met with a new client, and we were talking about what was most important to her and why she sought out a career coach. And she said, she'd been working at a state job for a while, and she was really interested in trying to find a job that allowed her much more time freedom, because what was really important to her was foraging for mushrooms. Now, that was the first time I had heard somebody actually make that statement as something as was really important to them. But we talked a lot about it last night, and it was so interesting to me. She is really excited about foraging for mushrooms and loves to do it at certain times of the year. And as we started to talk, she actually said she actually thinks she wants to possibly be a tax accountant, because it would allow her to do taxes for the first quarter of the year and then do minimal tax work the rest of the year and be able to have much more time to be out foraging for mushrooms, right? So what's important to everybody is going to be completely different. We all have the things that are going to be important to us in life and that are going to make our lives feel much more complete. So if the job she currently had didn't allow, the current job she had didn't allow her to take the time off she wanted to at the certain times of the year to be able to go mushrooming. And so now that's really important as she looks to what's the possibilities going forward. So it's going to vary greatly. And so don't feel like what's important to you is going to be the same thing that's important to others. So the next thing I always make people do is to break into this categories, right? I need a job that, and I want a job that. What are the things you need your job to have? So I think of things like, for me, I always need my job to have very specific health insurance, I need my job to have a certain salary so I can live. Now, what people need in a salary for a job is going to be vastly different, right? There are folks who say, you know what, I need a job that pays $30,000 a year and I'm fine, right? I don't need to make more money than that. Where I live, how I live can be fine on that. I also work with people who say to me, I need a job that pays $250,000 a year, right? Because that is the lifestyle they are choosing to lead. So you can do whatever it is. It's going to be very different. But what's really, truly what you need? Those are going to be your bare bones basics as you look for the position. And then you look at what you really want in a job. What's the stuff that's going to be important to you? And so you may need a job that has flexibility, but you want a job that has really ultimate flexibility. So thinking of the parts of the job that are really important. And you'll notice up until this point, we haven't really talked much at all about what are the actual tasks you're doing in the job. Because to me, that's the part that comes very last. We have to look at the whole picture. You have to look at all of the things that are going to be important to you. I always think of jobs too where, I jokingly always say, if you gave me a job making widgets with the right people and the right flexibility in the right location, I could make widgets, and the right salary. I would be happy making widgets. But have me make widgets with the wrong people in the wrong place, it's going to be absolutely miserable. Right? I bet many of you on this call can think of jobs where you've done the same tasks at two different places, and one place was perfect. It was a job that you wanted, right? Everything or most things about it worked for you. It met all of your needs. It matched your career values. It matched what you needed in life at that time. And then you went somewhere else and you did the exact same job, did the exact same tasks, but now it doesn't fit. Right? It's not the right culture. It's not the right place. It's not the right people. So sometimes you have to really think about the task almost as the very last thing. And I think that's the take on career counseling that I think is so different when I'm working with folks, because I think most career counselors start with, right, what skills do you have? So the next thing I talk to folks really in depth about is, what days do you go home from work energized? What are you doing on the days that you leave work and come home, or are volunteering, or are even just home doing things in your house, or just going on with life? What are the days that leave you energized? What are the days that leave you excited at the end of the day? Versus, what are the days that you go home from work and you're completely drained? Right? You're exhausted. You just want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all night. So if you're looking to make, right, a substantial career change, I'll recommend that you take the next month, make a calendar, or just take a sheet, right, and list like 1 through 30 or 31, depending on whatever month you're doing this for. So, do it for January. You can list 1 through 31 and state each day how you felt at the end of the day. Did you feel energized, and did you feel drained? And, some people love these types of exercises, and they'll go as far as rating themselves on a scale of, right, 1 to 10 at the end of the day. 10, you came home and you were energized. 1, you were utterly exhausted. And then think about what were the main things you did that day. So for some folks, right, I think of myself, right, doing things like this gets me energized. I'm excited to share information and to hope that I help one more person, right, get into the next career that makes sense for them. That I help somebody change their mind about what's important to them in a career, or what they should be looking for when they're looking for a career. And that energizes me. This week, I actually did a 2-day workshop. I led a workshop, so I was doing training all day in front of a group. And I did it with 2 other folks. They were 2 people I didn't know before. We were put together by a organization to lead this training. And at the end of the day, we went out to dinner. And the one woman who was with me said, oh my God, I'm exhausted from this. Like, I can't wait to go back to my hotel room to go to bed. And I remember thinking, gosh, I'm totally energized from this, right? I stood up and talked all day. I constantly was moving around. I was interacting with people. We went out to dinner, and I got back to my hotel room, and I could have stayed up for 5 more hours and done more work, because that really energizes me. I really love it. On the other hand, right, what are the days you go home from work drained? For me, the days that I go home drained and I want to crawl on my couch and, just watch the latest Netflix, binge watch, those are the days that I've sat at my computer all day, right? Those are the days where I've just had to do work that didn't involve me engaging with people and finding a way to help people. Those are the days that I feel drained. I've had many jobs where I've been in charge of fairly large budgets, and the days that I've had to write a budget, sit at my desk, update a budget, those are the days where I come home and I just want to order pizza, right? I'm not cooking dinner. If only T. Anthony's delivered further than, Brighton, I'd have it delivered 2 hours away here. Get my T. Anthony's pizza, sit on the couch, and just watch Netflix. So think about that. See, where do you draw your energy and what drains you? This is going to give you some good clues as to what are the things that are going to really make sense for you. What are the tasks and skills and strengths that you want to start using every day in your job? Finding that right career for you that's good for this point in time is going to really look at where are you going to draw your energy. And the part of that, oops, sorry, I went one too fast, is thinking about what your superpower is. So if any of you are familiar with Clifton Strengths or Strengths Finder, they're the same thing, they just changed the name over the past year. The Clifton Strengths model of kind of leadership is this idea, right, that we all have these superpowers. We all have strengths that are unique to us and that we are exceptional in. And if we put some extra effort into them, we'll become even more exceptional in them, right? We are going to be the best in these areas. And the Clifton Strengths Assessment really focuses on the idea of stop focusing on the things you're not good at. Stop focusing on your weaknesses, but focus on your strengths, right? What happens in a world where we are all focusing on the things we're good at instead of the things that we have that we're not so good at? And so for me, this is the place too where people draw their energy. I find that everybody who I've worked with, who, if I can get folks into a strengths-based mindset and to get into the place where you are using your strengths every day in your home, in your work life, that you have more energy, you will feel more engaged in your work, you'll be happier at work and in the rest of your life. And so for me, these are my top strengths. So if you do the Strengths Finder assessment, I believe it's $19 right now. And if you do the assessment, it comes out and gives you what your top strengths are. For me, my strengths are maximizer, strategic, communication, achiever, and individualization. And so these are the strengths that kind of help me get through the day and make me have the ability to, sorry, my phone rang. I just put it on voicemail. Make me have the ability to kind of get more energy. The days that I find that I'm tired and don't enjoy my day and kind of are exhausted when I get home are the days that these strengths aren't getting used. So Dan, if you could throw the other quick poll up. And so I want to know, what do you all find is getting in the way of you making your career change? Is it fear? Is it fear of change? Is it fear of not finding the right job? Is it perfectionism? Is it, right, you're not quite sure you can make the change and you can't do it 100% right? Are you overwhelmed, right? There's not enough time in the day. You can't even imagine how you would fit this in. I hear many career coaches out there say things like, looking for a job is a full-time job. And you're thinking to yourself, I have a full-time job. How could I ever look for one as well? or you're not quite sure how to do it, right? What are the steps? We'll give you a second there to kind of put that in. Okay, so we got about 20% of you feeling like you are unsure how to do it. 10% of you, perfectionism, about 30% fear, and 15% overwhelmed. All right, let's see. Oops. So, what I usually tell folks, give change a chance, right? Give it a chance to try to do something. Try to think of what the basic steps are. So, these are the things that you do in general to make a change, right? Decide that you really want to change. So when I look at these from a career perspective, right, decide you really want a different career. Decide that you are worth it and that it is important to you that you have a career that is the right career for you at this point in time. And that you're going to kind of take the chance to make a change and to get into a place that's going to be a way better fit for you. So you're going to set those goals, right? You're going to decide what it is that your career goal wants to be for 2020, right? Do you need a complete and utter career change, right? Do you want to go from being, a high school English teacher to being an accountant, right? Do you want to do something that's kind of smaller, right? That you're not quite sure what the career is you want to do next. You just want to figure some things out. So, right, make a routine, hold yourself accountable, track your progress. Find some way to every day set aside a little bit of time to work towards this. So what are things you can do in the next 30 days to kind of help you with your career change? One is find somebody to keep you on track. So it doesn't have to be a paid career coach, right? That's obviously what I do. And I think career coaches are really, really helpful, but it may be something that you can't afford or are not interested in, but find somebody who's going to keep you on track. Find a buddy, find somebody else who thinks they might want a career change, and have a weekly or every other week quick call with them, 15 minutes, right? Find somebody who will keep you on track, and every other week call you and say, what have you done? What have you done? What positive steps have you taken towards a career change in 2020? Right? So next is to actually set your goals for 2020. So it may be that a career change is a goal for you, but what are the baby goals kind of underneath that, right? If you were going to tell me that your goal for 2020 was to run a marathon, I wouldn't instantly say, great, let's go out and start running tomorrow. If you're going to tell me you want to run a marathon in 2020, the first thing I'm probably going to tell you to do is to go to a shoe store and get a really good pair of sneakers, right? Let's start with baby steps. So if you really want to find a new job for 2020 and you want to change careers, let's start with the baby step of maybe it's time to look over your resume. One of my favorite activities to do with folks is pull out your resume, cross out everything that you hated doing and you never want to do again. Take a Sharpie, cross it all out, and then highlight the things that you really enjoyed doing. Or sometimes you might need to add them on the side, because it might be the thing that you enjoyed doing was something you did once a year at a job and it never made it on your resume, right? Let's look at those things, right? Let's start with the baby steps. I highly recommend taking the Clifton Strengths Assessment. I think StrengthsFinder is an amazing tool, a very positive tool, and really does help people land in the right career for them at that point in time. Take a few minutes to assess your career values. Use the ones that I had. Like I said, Dan will send out a follow-up email that'll have my information. I'll gladly send you my career value sheet or find a different one online. Or write a new resume that includes your superpowers. Think about, what are your superpowers? What are the things that bring you energy? What are the things that you love doing? And figure out a way to incorporate those into your resume, right? Look at some of the resources that BU offers you. There's a whole bunch of great webinars that BU has on their archive page that you could go back and look at, that right? There's one I did from a few years ago, which I'm sure is fabulous, but there's also, ones by lots of other BU alums who will share some great expertise with you. So think about all the different things that you can do right now, right? What is something you can do right away to kind of get yourself on track? So, I always tell folks that making a big life change is really scary, right? But what's even scarier is regret. I can't tell you how many times, almost 100% of the time that I've worked with folks, they've come back to me a year later and said, gosh, I wish I made this change sooner, right? I have yet to have somebody come to me and say, boy, right, the career change that I decided to do because I left my career because it wasn't right for me at this point in time, I made this significant career change and I wish I hadn't. Right? That doesn't happen. People are happier when they find a career that works for their life, right? So we go back to that idea of finding a career, right, that pays you enough to live, that uses skills that you have, that you enjoy doing, and, right, most importantly, fits in with the rest of your life and your career. Right? So it becomes the right career for you at this point in time. It is okay if you're doing a career change that might feel like it's a step backwards or a step sideways or a step diagonally, right? Our careers aren't this kind of perfect line going straight up. I think we all think they're going to be like that, but really what our career's path looks like is some sort of weird lattice or like a 3-year-old scribble. So take a few minutes in your life each day, take some deep breaths, think about what's going to be great for a change for you, and start trying to think of the job and the career that is going to be the right career for you at this point in time. So I know we have, I think, about 10 minutes left. And so, yeah, I might see if we have any questions that folks have sent in, or if they have questions now they would like to put in.
Absolutely. So if you do have questions, if you just hover over either the top or bottom of your screen, you should see a box called Q&A, and you're welcome to submit questions in that space. Colleen, thank you so much for the presentation. We do have a few questions here to just to get things started. When talking about the career values, if you are certain that your current career and your current employer isn't aligned with your values, how do you evaluate a potential future career or a potential future employer to see if they're really truly aligned? Is that something you recommend people do in the interview process? Do you recommend people do informational interviews before they even apply with other people who work at that company or work in that career? What's your best advice for doing that sort of evaluation?
Absolutely. Right. This isn't the easiest thing to do, right? To evaluate a company's culture. So some of the things that I think are great to be able to do that, one is to use your BU network, right? Reach out to a BU alum who might work there. Use LinkedIn. There are some fabulous places. Fabulous search abilities on LinkedIn these days. I feel like it gets better and better every day. Search on LinkedIn, find a BU alum who maybe works there and reach out and say, I'd love to chat with you a little bit about this. Now, you can look at some other places too, right? Look at the company's website and look at their mission. Look at their stated core values. Even look at their annual report if they have one. It might give you some clues that, for some of the things that they find really important. And do some searches. I know there are places like Glassdoor where people can rate companies. I'm always a little fearful to say to folks, look at that and take it with 100% truth, because the right job for me might be the complete and utter worst job for Dan. And the best job for Dan might be the worst job for me. So, thinking about when someone says this was the worst place I ever worked, well, it could have been the worst place they ever worked for them. It might be a great fit for you. So thinking about that. And I do think that on the job interview, it's really thinking about asking the right questions yourself that will get at those answers that are important to you.
Great, and we do have a number of questions that just came flooding in, so we'll go
Great.
rapid fire here, just with the time we have left until the top of the hour. Christine is asking, can you suggest some methods to help identify your superpowers? Is that something that the Strengths Finder assessment would be good for, or is there a different type of assessment that people might use to identify what their superpower is?
Sure. So I start with the StrengthsFinder assessment, and then the other kind of exercise that I do, I simply call I rocked it, and I ask people to write down 3 stories for me of times where they felt like they rocked it in life. Right. So it might be as a volunteer, in a job, as a parent. Right. Maybe it was as a maid of honor at a wedding. Like whatever it is, write down those stories, put them aside for a day or two, and go back and read them and look through them and see, right, was there a common superpower that you had in those 3 places that you could kind of see what comes shining through for you?
Mm-hmm. Great. John is asking for any advice on moving off the traditional corporate employment track to self-employment or as an entrepreneur, consultant, advisor. This is something that you can speak directly to, so I figured we'd put the question right to you.
Sure. Right, step one, I think, is really making that decision for yourself. There's lots of great resources out there. I will say for myself, I did get in touch with SCORE, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives. They are a nonprofit that's part of the Small Business Alliance, and they will hook you up with a mentor for free. And I did that right when I started thinking about kind of going out on my own. And it's kind of sat down with a mentor once a month for about a year and really kind of talked through what were some of the things I was going to need to think about. I think the other part of that is, right, if you're interested in going out on your own as a coach or a consultant, is to always have a side gig, right? So I had always had a side gig as a coach and a consultant for the last 20 years. I'd have my full-time business, my full-time job, and then I would do little pieces here and there. So start it as a side gig, see if you really like it. The last piece of advice I'd say is if you're going to be an entrepreneur or coach or consultant, right, you have to love not only what you're doing as an entrepreneur, but you have to love or at very least tolerate marketing and budgeting, right? You have to either make enough money to pay someone to market you and do your financials, or you have to do them yourself in the beginning. And I think those are the parts that people don't realize how much time they take.
Great. We have a couple questions here that are similar, so I'll try to combine them. Folks who are happy with their job for the most part, but have a difficult relationship with their boss, so it's making them feel as if it might not be the best fit for them. What's the best move? Do you recommend, taking 6 months and invest in trying to improve that relationship with their specific supervisor, or do you recommend that they, jump ship and go somewhere where they might be more appreciated?
Right. This is like the $1,000,000 question I think I get asked the most often.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather growing up used to say to us all the time, you can do anything for a year. And I used to always have that mentality, right? Like if I got a boss that wasn't working for me, I'd be like, okay, 1 year, I can do anything for a year. And now I feel like, life is too short. Like I would not want to be with that supervisor that didn't work for me for a year. So I think some of it is thinking about, does everything else work? And is there a way for you to learn some managing up skills? So the last time that I got in a situation where I had a boss that wasn't matching, I ended up with a new supervisor after my boss had left. I went to HR and asked if they had any coaching suggestions. And the HR department where I worked actually paid for a coach for me to work with me on managing up. And so I met with the coach a few times. I got some tools on how to manage up, and I knew I could kind of continue to work there. I think for other folks, I say all the time, people rarely leave companies, people leave people, right?
Mm-hmm.
People leave jobs quite often because of a supervisor. And so some of it is thinking, is this someone you can learn to work with? Can you manage up? What can you learn from the situation you're in? And then if you really realize it's not going to be good and it's going to not work for you, then it's time to move on.
Yeah. We have a couple questions here just on resources that people can use when they're looking for a new job. One question is about whether or not the Strengths Finder might suggest careers based on your strengths. And then once you kind of know what type of career you're looking for, do you have any specific sites that you typically point people to when they're looking for a new job?
Sure. So the Gallup Strengths Finder very adamantly does not point people to specific careers. And it's interesting because as a, person who has a background in career counseling, it was one of the things that I really loved about the strengths assessment, because what it does do is kind of shows you where your strengths are and where you can kind of take them almost anywhere, and really looks at that idea of kind of individualizing things for folks. Um, I will tell you that when I sit down with folks, we'll read through it and I'll be able to say, right, here are some kind of general areas that I think would be great for you to look at. The assessments that really pinpoint you for careers, you're better off looking at things like the Myers-Briggs or the DISC assessment. But I will say, personally, I found those great as someone early out in my in early stages of career. But once I hit mid-career, I found it was pinpointing me in places that didn't seem to work. So there's that piece. And then the other question were resources for looking.
Yeah, are there any specific sites that you recommend that people start?
Sure. So, I mean, I can't say enough good things about LinkedIn. I feel like every year LinkedIn gets a little bit better at this. I think LinkedIn's job search tool is pretty amazing. If every day that when you get on LinkedIn, you just click on the jobs that you think are interesting, even if they're not jobs that you're going to want to apply for right now, just click on it if you see it's interesting, because LinkedIn is a really smart job search tool, and over time it will learn the things that you're interested in. The other thing that I'd say is look at the professional organizations for the career that you're in. So you're right, if you're someone who is big and small, so look at national organizations. So if you're someone in human resources, look at the national SHRM, right, Society for Human Resource Management. But if you're working in small nonprofits, I know in Western Mass, there's a little tiny group called Women in Philanthropy of Western Mass, right? But both of those type of places will be posting positions that are much more specific to your career. I find those to be much better than the big, giant conglomerate ones out there.
Mm-hmm. Great. We've got another question here. This comes from Carrie. What are specific recommendations for framing your past accomplishments and skills when you're preparing for a career shift into a totally new field? Do you have any kind of general advice for people who are looking to really make that radical change?
Absolutely, right? So one is you need to be able to tell a story, right? So figure out what is your story, why do you want to make this change? And then think about the skills that you have, the transferable skills, right? What are the skills that you have that are going to take you there? So I think of like my first real career change went from working with people with disabilities to a job where I did mainly training. And when I worked with people with disabilities, 2 days a year, I taught the American Red Cross first aid and CPR training. But when I went on those job interviews, you would have thought that every single day I did first aid and CPR training, right? Because that's what I wanted to do, was more training. So I talked a lot about that and really kind of looked at how I could take those skills and move them there. It's telling the story and pulling out those skills in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have a number of additional questions here. I realize we are at the top of the hour, and I do want to be respectful of your time. Do you want to do one or two additional
Sure.
questions?
Yes,
And
I
then
have a couple of minutes if folks
all
can
right,
hang on
folks
who are
can still
listening.
hang
Yeah.
on for a few more minutes. All right, Fortune asks, how do you get a job if you have a gap in your resume? And what can you do to make yourself more appealing to a recruiter if you're self-employed and not working for someone in that specific industry? Do you have advice for someone like that?
Sure. For resumes, I have started, and I find lots of people do this too, right? Taking your resume and breaking it up by your skills area, your general areas. So instead of saying professional experience and listing all of your jobs, I will say things like training experience and list my jobs that had training. And then the next section, I might say nonprofit experience and list things that I've done either working at a nonprofit or volunteering as a nonprofit. So it takes a little bit out of chronological order and makes some of those gaps not as blatantly obvious. I also think, again, as long as you have a good story, nobody is going to worry about you having some gaps in your resume.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I think women have a easier time with this because I think it is assumed that women have stayed home with a child and that's why they have the gap, be that correct or not. But truthfully, I think gone are the days that a gap in your resume is a really kind of bad thing. I think it's okay. But again, make sure you can answer that on a interview. That's the part that's most important.
Great. We do have one question here from Christine asking about that strengths assessment. So Christine, we'll be sure to include all that information in the follow-up email. You'll receive that in your inbox tomorrow, as well as additional contact information for any questions that we weren't able to address today. I'd encourage you to reach out to Colleen directly. Colleen, thank you so much for making yourself available for these types of questions and for this type of support. And I do want to give one more plug. You mentioned tapping into the power of the BU network. The Career Advisory Network is the specific subset of the BU Alumni Directory. And these are over 8,000 alumni who have raised their hand to say specifically that they are interested in providing career support and guidance, opening up their network to their fellow BU alums as well as current students. So that can be a really great place to start. I know 339,000 living alumni around the globe can be daunting, but the Career Advisory Network, you can search and sort based on industry, job title, school or college, and find the people who are going to be receptive to that, that initial email asking for support. So, Colleen, I do want to thank you once again for the time that you took today, for sharing your wisdom and insight on this topic. Clearly, it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in. So thank you so much for showcasing it for the BU alumni community.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
And my thanks also go out to everyone on the webinar, especially those who have donated to BU in the past. And as we approach the end of the calendar year, if you haven't yet made your gift to BU this year and you'd like to donate to support the programs that matter most to you, I'd certainly invite you to do so. You can do that at bu.edu/give. Every donor and every dollar truly do make a difference here at BU. So thank you again for your support. We have some really great webinars coming up in the new year, including tips for job hunters, a beginner's guide, and 8 ways BU can jumpstart your career. So I'd encourage all of you to visit our website, bu.edu/alumni/events, to sign up for those webinars and see the full schedule of upcoming opportunities. And in the meantime, between now and the new year, I'd encourage everyone to check out our career podcast. It's called Proud to BU. Features interviews with interesting and accomplished BU alumni telling the story of their careers and their paths to success. You can find that on any podcast app or on our website, bu.edu/alumni/podcast. Lastly, if you or any BU alumni that you know would be interested in showcasing a topic for the alumni community, feel free to contact me at the Office of Alumni Relations or by email at dangard, DANGARD, @bu.edu. Thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great day or a great evening wherever you may be. Thanks again, Colleen.
Thanks, Dan.